Shalom, family, and welcome back to the Semitic Jew channel, where scripture is read with context, logic, and historical honesty, and not with human theology. Today, we're in the book of 2 Thessalonians. If 1 Thessalonians taught Israel how to remain faithful under pressure, this book teaches Israel how to think clearly when things like fear, lies, and authority are being weaponized against us. So this letter exists because confusion was spreading and is spreading, and that confusion, when left unchecked, what does it do? It destroys communities much faster than things like persecution. Let's break it down. Number one, why Paul had to write again. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. After Paul's first letter, false reports started circulating. Quote, the day of the Lord already came, end quote. Things like that. Or things like judgment is already here. Or you missed it. That kind of talk creates panic. Paul opens 2 Thessalonians by affirming something crucial. He says, Israel's suffering does not mean that God lost control. He tells them plainly, God sees who is afflicting you, and justice is coming in due time, on God's time schedule, not on ours. So in other words, the translation is, don't let oppression rush your theology or cause you to make mental errors. Number two, persecution is not proof of error. Persecution is not proof of error. That's chapter 1. Paul reframes their experience. He's like, look, Israelites were being persecuted, not because they were lawless, but because they refused to bow to Roman power. Of course, some of us, many of us were being lawless, but things like Roman culture and the false authority that comes along with that, Paul says that their endurance, Israel's endurance, is evidence of faithfulness. Because oppressed people are often told that if you're suffering, you must be wrong, Paul says that this is not true. In fact, the exact opposite is true. He says that your consistency under pressure proves your commitment. Daniel, for example, they were taken into captivity in Babylon, but Daniel was still faithful. Number three, don't be shaken in mind. So Paul calls out fear tactics. That's chapter 2. This is the core of the letter. Paul warns them not to be shaken, troubled, and even panicked. Why? Because people were forging letters. They were spreading rumors and even claiming apostolic authority that they didn't have. So Paul is basically saying, look, stop letting confident voices replace careful thinking. Fear spreads faster when authority goes unquestioned. Paul tells Israel to, look, slow down. Let's think about this. Number 4, the man of sin. The man of sin, obviously that's about power, but can it be an ethnicity? Absolutely. But this is not a horror story. That's chapter 2. This passage gets turned into scientific theology. Paul isn't writing fiction. He's warning about lawless power structures, or lawless power structures that, number one, exalt themselves against the laws of God, demand loyalty to them rather than to God, claim divine authority rather than acknowledgement of God, and even sit in God's place rather than acknowledging the true God. It is about the systems of white supremacy or any other systems that pretend to be righteous, but while oppressing God's people. So Paul's warning is simple. Don't mistake their power as holiness. Don't confuse their authority with the truth. Number 5, Paul recenters Israelites on stability and tradition. That's chapter 2. So Paul tells them to, number 1, stand firm. Number 2, hold the traditions that you were taught. Number 3, stay grounded. So notice, Paul does not say that we need to abandon scripture or abandon the laws. He says, hold on to them. This is Israel staying rooted when things like misinformation is trying to uproot us. Truth stabilizes communities. Panic fractures communities. Number 6, discipline still matters under pressure. That's chapter 3. So Paul ends with something very practical. He addresses things like disorder, idleness, and people who thrive on chaos. Why? Because when community is under stress, internal discipline becomes survival, right? Paul is not being harsh. He's protecting the body. He says, don't enable behavior that weakens the community from the inside. And that's wisdom. The closing message is this. The book of 2 Thessalonians teaches us how to resist fear campaigns, how to discern truth from propaganda, and also how to think clearly when under pressure. And lastly, to recognize things like false authority. And we need to stay disciplined as a people. This book is for communities who know what it feels like to have narratives weaponized against them, lies repeated with confidence, and fear used as control. Paul's message is steady and clear. Don't panic, don't fold, and don't believe everything you hear. Stand firm. If this teaching sharpened your discernment, please like, share, and subscribe. And also comment down below your thoughts. In the next episode, 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy is about leadership, order, and protecting Israel from internal corruption. Shalom, family, and I'll see you in the next one.